I'm not going to address whether or not the police were correct. That's not my purpose. We all know that their actions were a bit obscene. They did a little much with killing this man. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm not here to talk about the actions of the police officers. We know. We know. It's normal now. As an African American in this country, a police officer can take your life and nothing can happen. We know this. We know this. So we're talking about this like this is new. This is not new. This may be new to some, but this is not new to the masses. We know that this has happened before, and we know that it probably will happen again. So the conversation does not need to be whether police officers should be punished. The conversation does not need to be whether their actions were justified or not. The conversation does not need to be on whether or not Mr. Alton was a criminal or not. That doesn't need to be the conversation. The conversation needs to be is, if you're a parent, what are you doing to prevent this from happening to your child? That's what we need to talk about, because it's going to happen again. The question is it going to happen to your child? Whether the 37 or 14, is it going to happen to your child? What are you doing? So what do we know? Eric Gardner, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland. We know this. This is not a new song. This is the same thing. Just in a different city with different groups of people. The same thing, though. And man was killed. And it could have been avoided. That's the bottom line. It could have been avoided. And no one's going to get punished for it. We know this. Come on. So what's the conversation? The conversation is, what led to that? Is there something we could have done or we could do to prevent from constantly seeing our people in these situations? Are you talking to your child about what to do when a police officer approaches them? Police officers can kill your child and get away with it. What are you doing to ensure that this doesn't happen? Let's look at the specifics. He lived in a shelter home. He was 37. According to the Huffington Post, he was a sex offender, registered. He had a criminal record. And he was selling CDs. He wasn't an artist. So what was on the CDs? He had 5 children. And you sold CDs for a living. Nothing against selling CDs, but when you have 5 kids, you might want to find another option, bro. Again, what happened to him is not okay. But is there something that could have happened prior to that could have avoided this altogether? How about instead of selling CDs and being friends with the owner of the store, you become friends with the owner of the store and you try to get a job there. You work there. You're not making too much money off selling CDs. So here's the question we need to ask ourselves. What are we doing to prevent this from happening to our child? To our children? Because it's going to happen again. So, are you teaching your child to respect authority? If someone says, get on the ground, do they ask why? Or do they just get on the ground because that person who's saying get on the ground has a gun? We're talking life and death here. We're not talking right or wrong. We're talking, I want to stay alive. I want to see my 15-year-old son graduate from high school. So if you pull out a taser and you hit me with it, am I going to try to be tough and stay on my feet? Or am I going to fall to the ground and figure out the logistics later? But in the meantime, people have guns and they're screaming. So I'm going to try to de-escalate this situation. Let's compare this. If there was a dog on the corner and the dog only barked at certain groups of people, would you tell your child about the dog? Would you tell your child to avoid going over there? Would you coach your child on what to do if approached by an angry dog? Or would you just act like it doesn't happen, act like it doesn't exist, And when he goes over there and gets bit, you're confused. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to prepare ourselves. What are you doing to prevent this from happening to your child? Have a conversation. We have to respect authority to a certain degree, understanding that the person who's telling me to get on the ground has a gun. They just shot me with a taser. I'm not going to say, well, what did I do wrong? I'm going to figure that out later. Because at that point, you're not going to avoid being arrested. You're going down. This will never stop. We can't erase hundreds of years of hatred in this country. It will never cease. So the question we ask, what led? What could you have done to avoid it? Because we know that the end result is always going to be the end result if it gets to that point. So how can you avoid getting to that point? So I have a couple questions just for you to think about. Just for you to think about and mull over. Feel free to comment. Sandra Bland. Wrong. It was wrong. But when someone is screaming with a gun and a taser, get out of the car. Could you get rid of the attitude just a little bit? Understand that this is a situation you're not going to win. Just something to think about. Michael Brown. What are you doing stealing, bro? Did you think that was going to end well? Shouldn't have died behind it. But we're thinking about avoiding the situation here. Eric Garner. I don't know too much about this situation, but selling cigarettes. Tamir Rice. Not necessarily to you, but to your parents. What was he doing in the park by himself with a BB gun? Like, what was he doing by himself with a BB gun? It was wrong. He shouldn't have. Someone should have been punished. But what was he doing? The mother of the 15-year-old whose father was Alton Sterling. Why was he in front of a press conference? He's 15. He's not an adult. What is your agenda by putting him there in front of all those cameras and microphones? Yes, he fell and he captured our hearts, but shouldn't you want to protect him more than that? Shouldn't you, not want him to experience that any more than he has to? But to put him in front of the cameras, the question we need to ask ourselves is, are we doing what we should to teach our kids so when they become adults and they encounter an angry man with a gun who shouldn't be angry, what to do? Are we teaching our kids that having a gun as an African American male in this country is not going to end well, whether it's against someone like you or an authority? People, let's stop getting mad about the wrong things. This has been happening for hundreds of years. It's not going to stop. The only way we're going to stop it is if we teach our kids to avoid situations like this. Something could have been done leading up to the officers assaulting him by someone to avoid this.